Welcome to the Honest Dog Breeder Podcast with me, your host, Julie Swan, where each week we dive in to discuss all things dog breeding so you can build a breeding business you love, producing dogs that fulfill their owners' dreams. I believe you can have an honest dog breeding program that also pays the bills. So throw those pods in your ears while you're cleaning kennels. I'd love to join you. You guys are in for a treat today. Today we have Jessica Harris of Missouri Dalmatians. Jessica, you've been breeding since 2019. And I love this. You went from getting fired from the Humane Society to being on fire with your dog breeding program. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to share my story with you.
Thanks. Oh, it's such a good story. All right. So starting out, you loved animals. And this led you early on to getting a job with animal control, right? Not the Humane Society yet. This was animal control?
That's correct. So I started in February of 2011 with animal control in my hometown. I did that for about 3 years. I really enjoyed doing that because you could see people who truly meant well for their dogs, but they just needed a little bit of guidance. We didn't have a lot of animal issues in my hometown, but just some guidance is all they needed. And it was actually pretty free flowing and very easy to maintain. It was a wonderful job.
When you said that I think a lot of people, when we hear animal control, like I know I cringe when animal control is called, right? Like, cause that just as a breeder makes me nervous. I'm always afraid one of my idiot dogs will have dumped a water bowl over and now I'm in trouble. Could you describe a little bit of the job as an animal control officer and like, because I always feel like it's just tickets and somebody who hates me, but that's not really the case.
Right. So we were referred to a lot as the dog catcher. We got a lot of dog calls of dogs running at large. And so we would have to catch dogs that were running loose. And if it was a frequent flyer, you knew who it belonged to. And most of the time I'd let them off the hook and be like, hey, your dog's out. You need to fix that hole again or find a different fence. And so I tried to have a very good rapport with these people because they were frequent flyers and you just knew who they were. Other people, if their dogs were, say, thin, neighbors would call in and say their dogs were thin. So you could give them an education that needed to either change food, take their dog to a vet, or give them more food.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you were looking actually to help solve the problem. It wasn't just like, ticket, you're a bad person.
Right. So, I mean, as long as they were very good and willing to learn, you absolutely would work with those people. You had other people who just were jerks and there was no other way to get through to them but to write them a ticket. But to me, that was the last resort. Education goes a long way. And animal control is all about educating the owner, because otherwise, if you take that dog, what are they going to do? They're going to get another one and they're going to treat it poorly too. So education was huge part of my job. I loved it.
That makes sense. Was that pitched to you like in training or was this just kind of your own philosophy?
I had a wonderful trainer. I don't recall how long she was doing it, but it was kind of my philosophy as time went on. You kind of learned what your niche was into it, and mine was education. I thought educating them was better than seizing the animal.
Makes a lot of sense. It just creates problems somewhere else, right?
Right. It turned into somebody else's problem.
And so animal control is like a municipality paid position usually, or county paid position. And then, but then you got married. So can you tell us a little bit what happened there?
Yeah. So I got lucky enough to get married to a cop, and I forfeited my job for him. Looking back, I don't recommend that. Since then, we have gotten divorced. So, but before that happened, before we got divorced, I seeked out another animal job because I really love the education side and the investigation side. So I was very fortunate enough to get hired by the Humane Society, and I started there in, I believe it was February of 2015.
Okay, so you were in animal control for a few years and then you moved in to the Humane Society.
Yes. So then I was hired as a statewide animal cruelty investigator, where I covered about 30 counties of the state.
Wow, that's a lot of traveling.
Yeah, I traveled a ton.
So tell us a little bit about working for the Humane Society. Like, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. I think a lot of people actually think the Humane Society and animal control are synonymous. They don't understand they're very different. One is, publicly funded and another one is a nonprofit, right?
Mm-hmm. So this one worked a little differently than most humane societies. So we actually had 10 investigators that covered the entire state. 5 covered a very large city and 5 of us covered the state. So we would do the investigation side and seize animals with law enforcement for very specific reasons that we could possibly touch into later. But they also had a very large scale ranch where they would house your large animal and livestock, and then they also had very large facilities to house your small animals. So they covered everything from surgeries all the way up to adopting out. It was
Wow.
huge.
This is a giant operation. And so the Humane Society can't seize animals correctly, but it could work with surrendered animals and it could work with animals picked up from like an animal control. Is that right?
So yes, you, as far as being an animal cruelty investigator or the Humane Society, you cannot go steal somebody's animal. That would be theft. That is a felony in Missouri. So they either had to sign over their rights for the animal, or you had to work with the local sheriff's office, and then you would have to get a warrant. But you would have to have proof of why you were seizing these animals. You can't just go steal their animals. And they were very big on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're going on to someone's property, would people call? I know people can call for animal control, but would people call the Humane Society and make a complaint instead? Like, is that just an alternative option, kind of?
Correct. So we had a hotline that they could call any time of day, leave a message, or they could call and talk to our office people, and they would take the complaint, and then we would receive it via our computers at home. And then we would just plan on our day according to the complaints, or that's at least how I did it. So I would drive anywhere from 10 minutes from my house to 3 or 4 hours one way from my house to go check on a dog to see if they had a dog house or if they were skinny. You know, if horses had hooves that were 3 feet too long. And yes, I saw that. I saw about everything under the sun that you could absolutely imagine.
Wow. Okay. So you're going up to someone's house. So how do you, so you just start talking to people then, following through on these complaints, or?
Yeah, so if they're home, you go up and knock on the door, and you have no means of protection. You just your sparkling personality and your clipboard and your pen, and you walk up and knock on their door, and honest to God, hope they don't shoot you. That has happened. And you make that conversation with them, and you learn to be very good and quick on your feet when you're talking to people, because we didn't go to your average Joe's. We went to some really, really rough houses in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And you talk your way through it. You explain to them why you're there and who you are, and ask if you can see your animals. 99% of the time they would say yes. Sometimes they would say no, and you can leave.
Had to leave, right? Like you didn't have a right to.
Yes, so I had no lawful rights to be there. So you would leave, and then I would, if depending on what my gut told me, I would contact the sheriff's department, see if they had any issues with this address, and then it would kind of go from there. Like, can I see the horses or the dogs or whatever animal is being complained on from a different view, a public view, like from a different gravel road or from the neighbor's property? I'd go to the neighbor's property, knock on their door. Hey, can I use your property? As long as I wasn't crossing property lines, that's legal. So you found ways to get off my property.
Got it. Ugh, I can see why it is a sticky thing for people too, because you're in there to try to follow up. And at the same time, it does feel kind of slimy when you're in the neighbor's yard because they gave you permission.
Right, right. You just really learn to talk. Most of the time after you've done it for a while, you could pretty much talk your way onto the property, but I still had to mind the law. I mean, I couldn't break the law to do it.
Yes, no, that makes sense. And that's different from animal control, right? Animal control usually has a right to go on regardless.
Oh yeah, I had a lot more rights there. And I had a very good working relationship with that police department, who I worked hand in hand with. I worked right in the same shift with the police department, which they do it now. It's very different. But at the time when I worked there, I was just like an officer.
Okay, that's very cool. Okay. So what did you see working in the Humane Society? What were some of the craziest things?
So my absolute worst call that will never ever leave my mind. About 8 miles from my home, there was over 100 dead dogs in a house. I had never ever ever experienced anything like that. I don't wish it upon anybody. So she actually let us in the house. We found her and explained our reasoning for being there, and she was what you would call a rescue. She rescued all of these dogs. They were in various stages of decay. They were all deceased.
So she
except
had
for
all of these dogs were deceased, but
one cat.
one cat.
Yeah, one cat. And it
And
was in a cage.
the cat was in a cage.
Yes, all the dogs were in your wire crates, like about those 36-inch crates. They were stacked on top of each other, 2 and 3 cages high, down the whole side of the living room. You could go down the hall in another room and in a U shape, completely full of cages and dead dogs. The whole house was set up like this. She also had a detached building that also had 3 rows of triple stacked cages of all deceased dogs. I've never experienced anything like that, but this is what is referred to sometimes as a rescue. So you have to be very, very careful about who you're releasing ownership of your animal to.
Yeah. Was there a reason? Was she ever able to explain what had happened?
She claimed many different things of what it was. Um, it didn't add up. We had a licensed veterinarian on our team, and we had to go in and number every single deceased animal. And we inventoried them and we examined everything that we could. And so she built a case off of that.
Yeah. And do you remember any of it? Like what they concluded?
I can't say 100%, but it appears some of it was starvation. It's been a couple of years since that case has been fresh in my mind, so I don't want to lead anybody wrong, but various stages of decay. So I would lead to believe that a lot of it was starvation. She claimed it was disease, and I just don't buy that.
Yeah, I mean, usually if it was like parvo or something, there'd be considerable
Right.
evidence surrounding that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So most of these were all adult dogs.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was very interesting. Absolute worst case I've ever had to deal with. And um we did go to court for that.
Yeah, that's awful. And I think,
Yeah.
I think there is this like I said, it's never talked about the side of rescue world fostering where you have dogs that are more or less, they're very difficult to home, whether they have training
Right.
problems, whether they have aggression problems, which are usually fear-based anyway, we have all these pieces. And yet, we don't want to put them down. We don't want to, so we end up just kind of leaving them and managing them. And I think when you have that many dogs, it's near impossible to give them the quality of life they need.
Right. I think it just is super important to make sure you know who you're giving them to
Yeah, that makes
as
sense.
far as the rescue. I do have a positive case that really hit home to me. I don't exactly remember what the complaint was, but it led me to a farm in Missouri, very southern Missouri, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Um, I actually took another investigator with me because it was such a large scale operation. Sometimes you don't know what you're getting involved in, so sometimes you would ask for backup to go with you because, like I said, all you have your sparkling personality and a clipboard and a pen. So sometimes backup is good. So I get the other investigator and we went down to this home, a very, very beautiful farm.
Yeah.
I made contact with a lady there, and she was more than willing to show me her facility. She had well over 180 breeding dogs, and it was absolutely gorgeous. I had ate off the floor in some of her buildings. That's how clean it was. She had it going on. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. I've never seen anything like it. All the dogs were happy, friendly. The place was clean. You would not believe how beautiful it was for that amount of dogs.
Wow.
So my first question to her after I'd went through, and I was just in awe shock of how gorgeous it was because that's not what I seen every day.
Right.
And so she said, I did it because I was losing my farm. She said, it's changed my life and they saved my farm.
Wow.
So it was a wonderful experience. What I really got to see with the Humane Society is sometimes you got to see people who actually did a really good job. Sometimes maybe a customer got a puppy from them and they were just mad. So who do you call? You call the Humane Society to try to get them in trouble. And it didn't go that way. So then the other side, you see awful things
Yeah.
that is legit, but
Yeah.
it wasn't always that.
So that was pretty neat. Was that the first time you'd ever seen anything like that?
That size, absolutely. I mean, I was shocked.
Yeah. I think that's incredible just to see. everything.
It
Just
was
an
just to
operation
see
that big.
yeah, to see, I mean, her whelping area, her puppies, where her adults were. I mean, it was a huge operation, and I just was so shocked of how clean it was.
Yeah.
And she hadn't, and these people had no idea that you were coming. You just
Wow.
showed up randomly. So it's not like she knew I was coming.
Yeah.
She was just as shocked to see me as I was to see her beautiful facility.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty, it's just inspiring to me, to see that, there's people out there making it happen and doing it right. So, all right. So you're in the Humane Society, but we know you get fired. You let that leak out at the beginning. So how did this lead you in, well, how did you get fired?
So I got called in to meet them at a hotel, and they had some print offs that I could see, and it was of my website. And they asked me how many breeding dogs I had, and I said I had 4. And they said that's over the state limit. And so unless you can produce a license right here, right now, you're fired. And so I was fired because I had 4 breeding dogs.
You've got to be kidding.
No,
Is that
it's on my,
really a law in Missouri?
if you have 3 or more intact females, you had to have a state license.
Oh,
If
okay.
you have 10 or more, you have to have a commercial license.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. I know Colorado has some similar stuff to that.
Yeah. So yeah, I was in the process of building my facility for that inspection.
Yeah.
But they beat me to it.
Wow. Maybe they just couldn't reconcile the fact that you could work for the Humane Society and breed dogs.
Very, very possible. Very possible.
Do you find that
So
the culture inside the Humane Society where you worked, I guess it couldn't be necessarily speaking for every Humane Society, but did you find that they were anti-dog breeder?
so I found it very interesting that if we went to some of our seizures, or if we went out of state to assist with a large scale natural disaster, it was always interesting that they wanted the small, cute toy breeds because they could adopt those out faster. We didn't want the pit bulls.
Yeah.
So because those are harder to adopt out, we wanted the purebreds, we wanted the dachshunds, we wanted the cute fluffy dogs.
So,
Well,
because a lot of people don't even know, but shelters where there's a abundance of excess animals, puppies, strays, Arizona, like where I live, we don't always spay and neuter here. So we have a lot more overpopulation. So you're saying that what happens is the areas with overpopulation will shuffle their dogs to other places in the country to be adopted out.
so what had happened, we had responded to a hurricane, and they were moving dogs out of that location.
Okay.
Either the owners had signed over their ownership to the dogs, and that Humane Society there needed to relocate them. And so sometimes we would take on, a
So
whole
this was
trailer load of,
disaster relief primarily in this case.
right, right.
So, and they said that they essentially wanted cuter, easier to adopt and manage dogs. So toy breeds and smaller animals and
Right,
instead of
right.
pit bulls or larger dogs.
Yeah. So we would take those.
Mm-hmm.
And but then it was kind of more of an agreement. You kind of got to take both, but we'll give you a few more cute fluffy ones so you can adopt those out faster. So I always found that kind of interesting. So it's like um they wanted those purebred dogs, but then, frowned upon the breeding of.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it's fascinating when people are like, oh, they just miraculously appear. You're right. Nobody ever intentionally bred purebred dogs.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, I do. Yeah, I agree. I had a Instagram follower one time talk with me, and she explained that in one of the bigger cities, um, they were actually running a breeding program as a nonprofit. Like the nonprofit had started to do it that way so that they could make more money.
Wow.
And I had been told about one during COVID when all the puppies were out of shelters, how the shelter had actually questioned if they should breed some of their intact dogs together so they could have puppies. And it's
Wow.
like that was the question. I was like, oh, we forgot our purpose. Um,
Right.
yeah, I think there's a lot of that. Or one other story I had heard was how a girl was working for her own, she had kind of created her own rescue situation, and she made a comment, oh, I hope I can sell these puppies so I can go on a trip this weekend. And I
Oh,
was like, oh, so those dogs that needed a home that you were supposed to be doing, it's really feeding your bills. Yeah.
right, right. It
Yeah.
seems like they kind of follow the money, and then, like you're saying, they lose track of the actual goal.
Yeah, I noticed it's really hard. It's really, I think it's a really hard thing to work with. And when you're dealing in a group of dogs that I don't want to call undesirable, I think that's the wrong word, but they're not intentionally bred. They don't have a
Mm,
stable temperament necessarily. You don't have a background story or a history to them. So you're working with very custom projects, if you will. Each one's different. It requires a lot. It feels weighty, feels hard.
absolutely. I agree.
So, and it's interesting that that was your experience as well. And I mean, I see this, I get these stories from all over the country.
It's sad.
Mhm. Whatever you do, you can't avoid the economics and marketing aspect. I think I hate to say it that way, but it always plays a role. Cuter puppies.
100%.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry, I digress. So interesting that you noted that as well. And then, so now you've been breeding and did, okay, we jumped ahead when you got fired, but you got started breeding a couple years before, or was it was probably a couple years before you got fired?
I did. I did. I got my first Dalmatian in 2018, and I can't say I was really after breeding, but it kind of got kicked around at home.
Hmm.
I had graduated to a new, better other half, and he was very supportive of my horse habits and my now dog habits.
Hmm.
And so I had found a stud dog, and I was like, well, we should breed her and just see what happens. And she was not accepting of that. So I actually ended up finding another female dog from the same lady that had the stud dog. So I raised my first litter in 2020, and I had 11 awesome Dalmatian puppies, and it was a really wonderful experience. I had a whole wait list for all of them
Yeah.
before they were ever born, and it was just fantastic. And in my first litter, I made $10,000, and it sent off something in my head that there's more to this.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
a great extra income.
Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference. And I think it's silly to me that we can't even, well, we talk about it, but where a lot of people hesitate to talk about it because, why would you do all this work if it didn't pay you money?
Right. I mean, everybody says they only do it to better the breed, and there's more to it. Like, you're not just doing it so you can rack up vet bills and rack up feed bills. You're doing it because it's a good income.
Yeah, it's a good income. And I mean, it can be a very fun and rewarding way to make money, and it
Abs-
also has a lifestyle that goes with it. And I think, I know you and I were talking earlier about how much more flexible your life is now because you breed dogs.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have got to become a totally different mom because of my lifestyle. My kids get to go on puppy deliveries with me. We get to see the world, and it is amazing. I mean, we just get to go on so many trips because I like to deliver my puppies. It just gives us kind of an extra bonus to go to the part of the country that we haven't seen. Um, Potentially going to Switzerland next year to take a puppy over there. So, like, that's really cool. Like, I don't think I would have been able to experience this with another job.
Yeah, I agree. The time and the income. And yeah, okay, so you made good money, you thought about it, and then I think you had told me after that first litter, because you weren't exactly sure if you'd love it or not beforehand, right? But you did that first litter, and then that sealed the deal for you?
That kind of sealed the deal for me. So then I took $1,000 and I reinvested back in my program. I found an adult female, and I bought another female. And so then the next go around, my stud actually went sterile. So I had to purchase a different stud. But I ended up having my next go around, I had 3 litters. So I went from 1 to 3. And that was extremely successful. And all of those puppies were immediately placed, and it was just a very wonderful experience. Um,
Yeah. And was this, I mean, was there anything that you felt you did particularly well in marketing, or was it maybe you got a little lucky with COVID, or?
I think this was a touch prior to COVID, but Facebook was huge for me. I marketed and posted pictures. I didn't do a lot of the paid marketing, but I just put them out there. As I went on to breeding, I started doing my homework, which I highly recommend doing your homework before jumping with both feet in. And I waited till after the first litter. After the first litter, I jumped in both feet. I started embarking my dogs. I started researching pedigrees, the color genetics, and all of that. And I learned something that I've always liked in life, which was something rare. Dalmatians come in long coats.
Which is like blew my mind. I didn't even know it existed until I talked to you. And I had a
Yes, so
Dalmatian when I was 5. That was my first dog.
that is so cool. More people need Dalmatians in their life. So I started researching the coat and then the color. So they come in lemons, tricolors, sables, blue, liver, and then your black and white and
Yeah.
orange.
And the sable blew my mind too. I had no idea.
Yeah,
So,
so that's been the hardest. That's been ever since I started breeding and then researching the color. I just got my first sable and my first sable long coat. The long coat's the first in the breed. There's never been another one. He's the only one, and he is super cool.
wow, that is so neat. I know you sent me a picture. He's so cute.
I got new pictures today.
Ugh, yeah, you're gonna have to send them. We'll put them in the show notes, guys.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
so
cool.
cool to see.
So I really started digging into my homework and finding this out, and they were very much so they're off standard. Well, let's just be honest and upfront. Long coats and all those other colors, they're off standard, so you catch a lot of hate from it. But it's natural to the breed. There is no in-crossing of other breeds. That's why it's very important for me to follow AKC's pedigree and the embark to ensure that I was breeding 100% Dalmatians. All of my Dalmatians have come back 100%. And the COI is very important to me. So I have dug very deep into this, and I found a huge love for it. I love it.
How do you have a number? It varies a lot with breeds, so take it all with a grain of salt, guys. But do you have a number you try to stay underneath for COI?
So I was guided in the beginning by a couple of people that you should stay under 5% in Dalmatians.
Okay.
My goal is to stay under 3.5, and I have many who are 0.
You guys want to know a secret? One of my stud dogs I bought is 38%. Just throwing it out there. And I've seen a lot of other breeds around 20 on average. So being
Wow.
below 5 and 3.5% is like nothing. Yeah.
That was news to me. I didn't even know that they were that high. Had no idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I work very hard to breed healthy, and then I do all my health testing and do chick numbers and all of that.
Mhm.
So after I got into it, I dug and did all the research to try to do it correctly and do it the best way that I could, even being off standard. I have
Right.
standards.
I love that. Yeah, and I think you're carving a little bit of you're carving a new path for yourself while maintaining a very high standard for what you're producing. But I mean, why do we dye our hair, paint our nails, and buy clothes? Because we like the look. I mean, I get it, right?
Right, right. I love the look.
Yeah, it's perfect. So, I did think it was interesting too. I don't know how much you guys know about color genetics, but obviously but like when I ran Embark on my dogs and I found they all have tan points. And I thought that's so funny. I have no dogs that have tan points, but they all genetically carry it on both sides, right? Double copies. And it was all because they're the dominant black gene, the dominant K, that of course it gets masked. And I think it's really interesting to think that all you really needed with your Dalmatians, because GSPs and Dalmatians are very related. They used a lot of Dalmatian in GSPs. um, but um, but that is like they're almost all that dominant black. And so you're saying there was a couple that had that little KY that allowed
Hmm.
to bring in some of those colors.
Right, right. And it was hard to find. To find the sable, it took me testing over 42 dogs, even dogs I didn't own. I was like, hey, can I send you a kit? Hey, can I send you a kit? Because I was going to find the gene one way or another. And I ended up actually just swapping out stud dogs with this lady who had one.
How did you know it even existed in the breed?
Somebody had sent me their embark, and because a lot of Dalmatian breeders would reach out to me and be like, can you please explain this gibberish to me because I have no idea what it says. Randomly, this girl sent me an embark, and her puppy carried sable. I was like, where'd you get your dog? So then I reached out to the dog owner, and about a year later, she ended up swapping a dog with me.
And so you
So
ended
it
up
was
having it.
very cool. Yeah.
Remember when we first talked, you said something that I thought was so brilliant. And you were like, these genetics aren't hard. You can do the numbers, you know what you're going to get. So you can buy the dog with the copy you need and make what you need. And I
Absolutely.
love that. I think more breeders need to dive into that. Yeah.
100%. So maybe what I told you is I have some dogs that are just black, what I call plain black and white. I know they're gorgeous. I love my black and white, so I'm not hating. I have them, but genetically they carry liver, lemon, where they can produce orange. They carry tricolor, they carry long coat, but I can manipulate into what they're going to produce by matching them and pairing them with a specific stud dog. So
Mhm.
I'm not mass producing color just randomly. It's very specific and very driven. It's not just um, carelessness.
Right. And of course, all your dogs are passing their health testing. So the pool of dogs you're playing with has already met the standard. And I
Right.
that's like it's like you get a good dog with a good temperament, which of course Dalmatians generally have pretty good temperaments. And then you're now just the third factor is playing with the color. And I love that.
Absolutely. And the coat. We cannot forget the gorgeous long
That's
coats.
true. Yeah, you guys got to check this out. That's why you don't really see, I guess are there Dalmadoodles?
Very few, but I have seen them.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm always fascinated by everything you can cross with a doodle.
They look like a wired-haired Dalmatian. The ones I've seen, they look
That
kind of
makes
just
sense.
wired.
Yeah,
They are really cute. I'm not going to
yeah,
hate on them either. They're cute.
yeah. And then what is like the grooming for a long-coated Dalmatian?
Um, we live out in the country on 40 acres in the woods and in the sticks. They are not hard to maintain. I mean, really, they're fairly easy to maintain. A little quick brushing if they get some burrs in their hair. They love the ponds and stuff, so they need some baths. But I mean, it's not all that extra.
Can you give us another, because of course, podcast, people can't see anything. Can you give us another breed of dog that like is it like a golden retriever coat where it's thick like that, or is it not that dense?
I don't think it's quite that thick, but it's so they range. Some have just kind of longer ear hair and furnishings, and others are like full blown looking like a golden retriever. I mean, they got a ton of hair factor. So it can vary a little bit
Mhm.
as far as how much coat you get.
Yeah, that makes sense. How has it been working with other breeders with
You know,
this, looking for what you're looking for?
it's hit or miss. You find your BFFs and you find the ones you avoid.
That's probably fair and everything. So,
Yeah, so I mean, I have another dog breeder who we made an agreement that we only trade dogs. There's no money involved. That
mhm.
way we can further our programs and switch out genetics and pedigrees and COIs and or even trade stud services where it doesn't cost us anything. So we can grow our program debt free.
I love that. Dave Ramsey
Yeah.
would be proud. And
I,
yeah,
I love Dave Ramsey.
no, he's so
Dave
smart.
so Dave Ramsey would be very proud of my car incident. Can we
Oh,
touch
tell
on my
me.
car incident?
Yeah, oh, this is a great story.
Okay, so after my being fired, I'm driving home on my paid off car of 6 months, and it just shuts down in the middle of the road. So I'd been fired. I don't have a job to, go get a car loan like everybody does, including myself. But I finally did figure out a way to do it. So I get this car loan and I buy a car. It's an SUV. I'm driving a puppy out of town to deliver it. Deer runs out in front of me and totals it.
You just got this car.
I just got this
Brand
car.
new
I'd
loan.
paid yeah, yeah, brand new loan and, quote unquote, no job.
Right.
So I had just sold a litter or two of puppies by the grace of God, and I went and I paid cash for this SUV that I have now. And I could have never, ever, ever done that before if I was working my normal 9 to 5, which I
Mhm.
did not do that with the Humane Society. I worked a lot more hours than that. But, your normal 9 to 5 job, dog breeding has changed my life completely. I cannot express how much it's changed my life. It's given so much to my kids, so much to my family to just do what I do. And I love it. It's not like I do this because, oh, it makes money. I do it because I love it and it pays the bills and I get to do so much more.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I just think you hit that sweet spot. And what do you think? People are gonna be like, hey, well, I want that too. Do you have any tips, things that you've always followed that have always come through for you? Any advice?
You absolutely have to do a good job. There's no cutting corners on your dogs. I mean, you really need to get nice quality dogs. You need to do your homework. You need to know that if you're wanting to follow genetics and color, you need to know. You've got to do your homework on that and find out what you love and what you're passionate about. Even if it's off standards, you better have thick skin because you're going to catch the hate and you're going to be called a backyard breeder. You're going to be called all kinds of things under the sun, but stick to what you love because those people don't bother me. They throw fuel on my fire, and we all know I'm on fire.
Right. No, you're doing such a great job. Oh, I love it. I love it. And I think it's great because you have a lot of people coming to you, not just for off standard either, right? Like you have a fair amount of people just want standard colors, right?
Yeah, so a lot of people still want your typical black and white Dalmatian, and I absolutely can provide those too. And then the long coats are really starting to become a very big hit.
Mhm. Do they
And
shed
they,
or like because of the grooming need of it, like kind of like a poodle, or is it not so much?
so Dalmatian shed 365 days a year. That you cannot get around the shedding of a Dalmatian. But the good thing about the long coats is it's so much easier to clean up and it doesn't get embedded into like your skin, your couch, your car seats. Like it's so much easier to clean it up because those little fine needles of glitter it's rough sometimes. But yeah.
I remember that my GSPs are the same. I have black seat covers in my truck. They're Carhartt, and
Hmm.
I swear it's like my dogs sit back there and weave their hairs into it. Ridiculous.
Absolutely. I can relate to that. So yeah, that's what I usually tell people. So much easier to clean up. But
Yeah, that makes sense. And then from anything else you think that worked out well for you? I mean, you sound like you've always worked to take litter money and pay debt, make sure you were never keeping it, running any.
right. So I'm completely debt free but my house and 10 acres. And I
Wow.
and I I'm 6 months ahead of my house payments. So my goal is to continue to do that and hope I set a goal for myself a couple of days ago. We'll see how it goes, is try to pay my house off in 5 years.
Oh, that's awesome. And so you're just taking that extra cash and throwing it down and it's covering
Yep.
your, this is your job. And yeah. So how do you decide, right? How do you decide when you have a lump sum of cash come in, what to put down on your house, when to reinvest in your dogs, and then when to treat your family? What's your thought process?
I should probably brush up on my Dave Ramsey to make him more proud. I have followed Dave Ramsey and I love it. I don't have, if I'm being honest, I don't have a percentage or anything like that because I would say over the last year or two is when it's become more successful and I've had more cash on hand.
Yeah.
So I don't have that answer.
Okay. So you mostly just kind of do what feels right. If your dogs need something, they get what they
Oh,
need. Yeah.
100%. And I treat them like I'll make a big chewy. Like usually when a litter goes home, I reward my adult dogs. They did this for me. I'll order a big old chewy order of new toys and chews and bones, and I make sure they're taken care of because, like I tell my kids, if it wasn't for the dogs, we may not have this. They
Mhm.
know that the dogs take care of us, and so it's my job to take care of them. They
Yeah.
absolutely get the best care that they can because they do an amazing job for me.
Yeah. Okay, so we love that you've had so much success with all this, but people are always curious, numbers wise, how many breeding females do you have actively breeding for you?
So I usually keep about 10 females into my program. And
Okay, so
I've had
Mhm.
I've
10.
had very good genetic diversity with that.
That makes sense. Yeah, you can do a lot with 10. And I know you have probably more studs than the average breeder, but that's just for genetic purposes, which makes sense. Um, so you're breeding back to back, right? So about 20 litters a year, no big deal. Your dogs cycle primarily over 6 months, every 6.
Yes, most of them do, yes.
That's pretty standard, I think, for our kind of dog. So you pretty much have litters going all the time, coming and going. Do you hire help or how do
No,
you, you're able to do it with just you and the kids? And
mostly me.
yeah.
So in my horse side of the world, I have a partner and he always said if never hire somebody to do something you can't do yourself. So I really took that to heart. I'm not going to hire anybody to pick up my poop because I can do that. And why would I pay them to do it? Now, don't get me wrong, there are probably some instances that health reasons and such that people do need to do that. So I'm not hating on them for any reason. But if I can do it, I'm doing it.
So
It's my job.
yeah, so you've just consider it your job, you own it, and but that's really great because it's kept you in a lean overhead. I think that's something I see a lot of breeders get out of hand with really fast is they're like, oh, that's frustrating, I'll hire it out. Oh, this is frustrating, I'll hire it out. And then you get this really high overhead, which now requires you to sell so many dogs. And then you're stuck. And yeah, I agree with you. How in the world do you manage that many dogs by yourself or just with your kids' help?
So it can be pretty challenging, but your facility's huge.
Yeah.
I decided very quickly that I needed a facility.
Mhm.
So my puppies were very gracious and they built me a facility. I have it's a concrete on the inside and concrete 5 foot out, indoor, outdoor access with heating and air conditioning. And then the rest of their runs is rock. And so I clean it like a horse stall. It doesn't take very long. You go through, pick it, toss it over the fence, and then Jake brings the tractor and scoops it up and hauls it away. It's
That's
very easy to
fun.
manage and maintain.
Yeah, so you kind of just doing pressure washing. I mean, the dogs are going outside, so that's really keeping your indoor side pretty clean. How many litters did it take you, do you remember, to pay for something like that? Ballpark.
I just kind of paid for it out of litters as they were coming through. A family friend helped with the building, so that obviously helped with some of the cost. And so I just kind of paid for it a little bit at a time. So I didn't have necessarily the money set aside for it because at that time I was still working a full-time job and raising litters, so I wasn't as large scale then.
Mhm.
Um, so it was just a little piece at a time, and I just kind of added on as I needed.
Yeah, and so it just makes all the difference, right? So how much time do you spend cleaning? Would you say every day or every week?
Um, I try to go out every morning and toss poop, and then we clean buckets. Every couple of days, we'll take them out, wash them, bleach them, and put them back in. Honestly, the upkeep of it is not what you would think. It's
Yeah,
really easy as long as you stay on top of it. That's key is staying on top of it. Take the time it takes, and it'll take less time.
yeah. So you're figuring maybe about an hour a day, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if that.
Maintain. Yeah.
Now, when you add puppies in, we're going to add in some more time. But as far as maintaining my adults,
Yeah.
it's a breeze. It is not a hard job.
Hmm. That makes sense. And so they've got the exercise runs and all that, and that pretty much just keeps them occupied. They're happy because they get to play with each other all day and do stuff. And
Yep.
yeah,
And then we can let them out during chore time. They run, play. I mean, so anybody think they get locked up and stuck in cages all the time? No, they get to live a very well-rounded life. I mean, they're great, great dogs.
yeah, no, I love them. I really do. Okay, so your husband now sounds amazing, right? Not only is he getting the tractor and scooping up all the tossed over the fence poop, I've just got this great visual. But but he's also very supportive of you in the program. Is there, I mean, I know you were breeding when you guys got together. That was already a thing, right? But how does he support you as far as the breeding goes? Is there any agreements you guys that have had or discussions that you could share that worked really well to keep breeding not take over your life?
What I tell everybody is that everybody needs a Jake in their life. I just got super lucky and he is so supportive. It doesn't matter if I want to bring home a new dog, a new horse, or hey, I have a new project. I mean, he's 100% in. So honestly, everybody just needs a Jake.
Yeah.
But so I do my own deliveries. Like I said, I try not to pay anybody for something that I can do myself. So and the safety of my puppies. Sometimes in transport, they can pick up extra goodies that you don't want them to have. So I try to do my own transport.
Mhm.
And while I'm away, Jake manages it all. So that's why I can really say my program's easy to manage because it's so easy. Jake can do it,
Yeah.
and any person could do it. So all my adults are all on one type of feed, and there's a specific scoop. I make them a list because sometimes dogs need extra food, and so it's so simple. He has no issue doing it while I'm gone for a week at a time, and there's really no complaints. He has carried a mama dog to the house for me while I was away, actually just the other day, and because she didn't want to walk, he carried her into the home and he whelped her out in the house for me. And
Wow.
he was right there with her the whole time.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, so that cloning software for husbands is not out yet, but we'll be calling you.
He's it. He's it.
So if you didn't have to worry about selling your dogs, they all just sold, would you hire help to expand, or do you think you would just keep it to be something manageable based on what you could do?
Why I expanded as far as I did was not to produce puppies. It was to collect genetics, collect pedigrees. I didn't do that for mass production. I only did it to bring in the bloodlines and the color.
Got
And
it.
so now what I've done is I've combined dogs. So I'll take 4 dogs and turn that into 1 dog. Then I can, some of the dogs that I got from another breeder, they got it out completely, and they had some senior dogs of stud dogs, just so we're
Mhm.
clear. They were 8 years old when I got them, still very healthy, very active. But I wanted those genetics, and so they're a part of my program right now.
Mhm. And so
And
when you
so
say
that
you're taking 4 dogs and turning them into one, you're breeding them together, making litters, and then breeding those again. And so all of those dogs will ultimately be there in a limited capacity until you create the dog you were trying to get.
right, right.
And that makes
But I
total
don't
sense.
just and some of those, even the second generation, I don't just dump those dogs. Like, I don't want anybody to think that I'm breeding them and then I just dump them. Sometimes those dogs are very much a part of my program and very important, because I can't bottleneck my genetics either.
Yeah.
So some of them actually will stay and they'll absolutely be a part of my program. But I expanded that largely to bring in the genetics.
Yeah, I think it's smart. I really do think that's how you're able to keep that huge genetic diversity and that low COI and still produce all the fun things you're producing. I think it's
Yeah,
great.
it's been a wild ride, but it's been very colorful and fun.
Right, no pun intended. Yeah. How do you
How about
manage if you're cleaning and managing all these dogs yourself? How do you manage buyers and marketing, and how do you juggle all that?
It's a lot, but I do it all myself. I mean, nobody else has access to my notes and how I take payment. Nobody else has access, just me. So um, most of the time I use a note app on my phone. But luckily I've been following you for a while and I'm learning and growing. So I've dove into Honeybook and the email, and I'm revamping my website just to make things easier.
Yeah.
So I'll have more time, with my family now that I have the ability.
Makes so much sense. And I think those are the things you can absolutely streamline. But it sounds like your SEO is working well for you. And it sounds like you're not relying on an Instagram post every 5 minutes in order to sell a dog. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of comes in waves of what I've noticed. I kind of have an automated message that when somebody reaches out to me, it sends to them, what are they looking for? The sex, the color, the coat, if they're wanting breeding rights and or pet rights. Because what I've also noticed in breeding off standard is you kind of have some people come after you a little bit shady. They don't want to tell you up front. So I make it very easy I just ask up front, are you looking for a pet or breeding rights? That way I know that they're not trying to be shady.
Yeah.
And then the last question I ask is, where did you find me? Because I
Mhm.
want to know. I want to know, where am I getting this organic feed, and my next step is, how do I make that even better? I'm always looking to see what can I do next and what can I do better. So my other recommendation is podcast. Uh, get on there and listen to them. I've listened to several hours of yours, and then you also give us leads to other people to grow, with social media and different things. So that's been a wonderful help, is just doing your homework.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you actually are taking the time when you're cleaning and working with your dogs on the mindless stuff, more or less, and you are investing that into your education and giving you more resources. Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head. So I spoke about education with my animal control is I don't ever miss out on an opportunity to learn something new and how to do a better job of something.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously paying off for you. I
It's
mean,
been
to,
great.
to build what you've built in just honestly, just over 5 years is incredible. I mean,
Thank you.
it's huge. It's beautiful. So thank you so much. And if you were going to give us one piece of advice to new breeders or whatever, what would it be?
I would say it's just the education part and doing your homework, and don't be scared to ask somebody. Other breeders have been a wealth of information. They've been there, they've done it. Um, get Become friends with a breeder who's been doing it and you admire because you can call them up at midnight going, hey, this is what's going on. They've been there. So that's been huge for me, is having a best friend who does this too.
Yeah, I agree. And I have found that while I had a really rough start with good breeders, there's a ton of really awesome breeders out there that actually are normal people that understand.
Right. They have the same mindset too, that it's okay to make $1 off this, and not that you're just doing it to better the breed, which is still fine, but you can make a living off this.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, well, you're a shining example. Yeah. I love that. Thanks so much for coming on. And where can people find you?
I'm on Facebook as Missouri Dalmatians, and my website is also Missouri Dalmatians. I do have an Instagram, Missouri Dalmatians, and I'm a little slower on there, so I'm still learning that one. Even TikTok's a little slow for me, so I'm still learning that. That's still a learning curve for me.
Sure, but people can definitely check out your website and see your beautiful dogs. I'll throw some pictures in the show notes so people can see that easy, because you just got to see these guys. They're so cute.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.